We talk about community-oriented policing. We talk about policing in the 21st century, but what does that really mean? In short, in very, very short terms, it's communication between the community and the law enforcement entity that polices your neighborhoods or comes to your aid when you ask or you need it. We have to have that relationship. A lot of things get done when this is a great relationship. And what has happened in the recent years with COVID, with some bad press on things that happened, not in Fitchburg, but in our nation, has painted law enforcement in a bad way. And with COVID not being able to communicate or meet with you all in close proximity, that's kind of created a distance. You should be able to know who the police officers are in your community. Fitchburg is a community where that can be done. It's not a big city, it's not a village either. And it's important that you get to know that. So what we started in 2023 is to bring back that communication, bring back that engagement, and start off slow, 1 meeting a month. If these meetings grow, which I hope they do, and we have that interaction, many things are gonna happen. As we talked earlier off the record, it's what happens, I want to create a neighborhood watch group. How do I do that? I have some problems in my neighborhood, how do I do that? By that type of engagement, some people see it on different websites, problem-oriented approaches occur. And through problem-oriented approaches, you will learn that not all problems have to be solved by the police as much as we together will solve the problems. And sometimes it may even be you who help solve that problem. But working it, talking it over together, we're able to do that. We want you to see the officers that are going to be in your neighborhood. We want to have a relationship where, you know what, it's not a 911 call. Okay, but I have some officer's name and number, and maybe I'll call that person. That's the way we should be operating in the city of Fitchburg. You deserve that type of attention, and I'm hoping that we can get there eventually.
Quick overview about the city. What you'll notice is sometimes, depending on what map you've seen, we have aldermanic districts. We break it up into police districts. We have 4 police districts: west, north, central, and east. I'm here tonight because we're in your neighborhoods here in the central district. So our lines come up Fish Hatchery Road. We kind of cut out a notch here at High Ridge Trail, and it goes all the way over to Seminole Highway. You're going to see the west and north look pretty small in comparison to the other 2. We revisited what our districts were when we took on the town of Madison last fall. We did this as a statistical measure, looking at where the calls for service were. We factored in what response times for officers would be to get there, using the different roadways, the highways we have to get to. This is the section that we took on last year, former town of Madison. We identified that getting to that area from anywhere over here isn't easy because there's no straight thoroughfare through. So that was how this got districted out. You can see north and west are much smaller. They demand that much more of our time. They have much more calls for services there. And then with central and east going pretty much top to bottom, I think it's about 7 miles from top to bottom, it's a pretty large spread. But with all that geographical area, most of the calls are still in this northern, highly densely populated areas. So we still obviously patrol when we can, but we're going to talk about staffing a little bit and why we dedicate ourselves a lot to here, because it's call-driven activity. And the big one here is our current staffing structure. So you'll notice we got 3 of the 4 here today. We have 9 sergeants. This is actually very new. Up until December 31st of last year, we only had 8. That did not afford us 24/7 supervision coverage. January 1st, we were able to get that 9th position, which gave us 24/7 supervision coverage for the first time in our history. It's a pretty big deal for us. Why that's important, especially more now than ever, what we used to have in Fitchburg was veteran staff officers on these day shift positions where we didn't have the coverage. So we'd have 10, 15, 20-year veterans who really knew what they're doing, they knew the policies, they knew how to handle themselves very well. They were allowed to operate without everyday direct supervision. Now we have officers on our shift that we have upwards of 10 to 15 years of experience, but we're also looking at 5 years of experience. Much younger crowd now in our ranks as trends have changed. So that 9th position for us to have an experienced, trained and educated person to oversee and make sure that they're doing things properly and safely was very important. We're currently operating at 8, as we had one depart for another agency. So we're working on what that coverage looks like in the meantime while we look to fill that position. 5 detectives. We actually also last year supplemented that with a 6th rotating officer that is now helping with the detectives. That's beneficial on a lot of fronts. It affords the detectives more opportunity as someone to help with follow-up investigations. It gives that officer knowledge from that side of the fence of how investigations works, to then bring that back to patrol when the rotating spot is done, and educate officers and sergeants as to best practices in the field. 37 officers, which we'll get into in just a moment. We also had a neighborhood officer last year, which was the first we've had. An officer dedicated to work with neighborhoods, larger apartment complexes, identify problems, trends, and work with management to facilitate how to mitigate problem residents. And if we had areas like the chief mentioned, problem-oriented policing, a lot of times we get information from those contacts of management that we wouldn't normally get. They have a good relationship with that neighborhood resource officer who has actually since been promoted to sergeant, and now this position is still vacant, which we'll talk about that in a moment as well. Then our professional staff. We have 12 that comprise our dispatch, full-time dispatch, records liaison, and our records or typists, as well as our community service employees. And then 5 part-time dispatchers that assist and fill in when we have vacancies in dispatch. So if we look at this pie chart, this is patrol staff, purely the police officers that are on the road responding to calls. You call 911, this is the group we're talking about coming. You've got a K-9 position who up until this year didn't count towards staffing. He was able to respond and do additional tasks with Dane County Task Force, the special response teams, Madison SWAT. He was a resource for the county. And as we talk now, he's assisting Madison with an incident as well. So he's very resourceful, but with where we've come January 1st, he's now counting towards a patrol schedule as an officer responding to calls. Rotating detective is a police officer, but not responding to calls. They are part of the detective bureau, so we take one away from our overall patrol response. We have 3 officers currently in field training. 1 comes off this week and will join the ranks. He actually has experience from the Milwaukee Police Department. And then we have 2 others in training, one who's never had law enforcement experience, and one from the Dane County Jail who has 2 years of being a jail deputy. They come off in May. Out of all that, we have 11 spots on patrol that are vacant, which means that the green pie there, 57%, that's our operating strength for responding to calls currently. We're down 11 officers, which is a factor in our supervision. We can't promote right now that 9th spot that we want for that supervision because it creates a huge void on our everyday shift staffing. Just to have a bare bones, fully staffed patrol here, we had 9 officers on day shift, 9 officers on second shift, and 9 officers on the third shift. We are authorized more on top of that to create cover positions between the first and second shifts and the second and third shifts. Those are our peak call taking hours. We have the most need for additional officers at the time, and it allows them to have vacation, family leave for having babies, injuries, training times, and allows us to still maintain operations with those people missing. What we run into now is we don't even have the 9, 9, and 9 to cover the basic staffing for our shifts. Currently, we're at 8, 8, and 7, first shift, second shift, and third shift. So it will help when these 3 get off of training, but even them coming off training doesn't even get us to our bare minimum of 9, 9, and 9 across the board. That affords us 4 officer minimums at any given shift. That's our operating baseline threshold. If there's a shift on, you're going to have at least 4 officers. That's been the minimum since I started back in 2011.